The first time saw the emperor's palace, he could hardly breathe. The walls towered like mountains of gold, reflecting the sun in sharp, blinding streaks. Human eyes weren't made for such brilliance. He squinted through the glare, his wrists raw from iron cuffs that bit into his skin with every step. Soldiers in polished armor dragged him forward, their boots echoing against the marble floors. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the chains, but because of the weight of every gaze upon him. Every noble, minister, and general in the court stared at him like he was a creature from another world, which, in a way, he was. The chamber stretched wider than any hall had ever seen. Golden chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings, their crystals catching the light and scattering it like stars. Tapestries lined the walls, depicting battles and conquests of 1,000 years, victories of empires long before humans had walked among the stars. And at the far end, above the crowd, sat the emperor. His throne was a mountain of ivory and jewels, radiating authority. Even from this distance, could feel the weight of it pressing down on his chest, as if the emperor's power itself tried to crush him before he even spoke. The guards pushed him forward relentlessly. His legs ached, his arms burned, and his heart pounded like a drum in a storm. Whispers spread through the court like fire, some curious, some mocking, some filled with fear. Humans rarely reached this far. In fact, many here thought it impossible that a human could survive long enough to even stand in their presence. But here he was, trembling, yes, but standing. Lifted his head and forced himself to meet the emperor's gaze. Cold, unyielding, like staring at a mountain of ice. The eyes that had witnessed countless rebellions, crushed entire worlds under one command, now fixed on him. And yet, even under that intimidating stare, felt something awaken inside him. Fear was there, sharp and bitter, but so was something else, determination. His people had suffered for too long. His voice, small though it was, could not remain silent anymore. From the corner of his eye noticed her the alien queen. She did not sit on a throne, nor did she follow the ceremony. She stood aside, tall and regal, her posture perfect, her eyes calm but burning with intelligence. There was no fear in her gaze, only recognition. Met her eyes briefly, and for a moment the chaos of the court seemed to pause. In that single glance he felt something impossible, hope. The emperor's voice thundered through the hall, demanding attention. "Bring him forward," it commanded. Soldiers tightened their grip, forcing closer to the throne. The crowd fell silent, hanging on every sound, every motion. The walls, the gold, the eyes of hundreds of witnesses, it all felt like a trial, a test he could not fail. His mind raced. Every memory of his journey flashed before him. The villages burned by alien soldiers, the friends lost to war, the countless nights he had stared at the stars, wondering if humanity mattered at all. And yet in this moment he realized something. It did matter. He mattered. Every human mattered. The chains around his wrists could not bind the truth in his heart. When he finally stood before the emperor, his voice quivered, not from fear but from the weight of all he carried. "I am not here to beg," he said, steadying himself. "I am not here to hide. I am here to speak for those who cannot, and I will not be silent." A murmur rippled through the court. Nobles shifted uncomfortably. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Even the emperor's expression twitched slightly, a crack in the mask of absolute control. And at the edge of the chamber, the alien queen's eyes softened ever so slightly, as if she had been waiting for these words all along. His chains clinked softly as he lifted his chin. For the first time in his life he felt seen, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as a voice of courage. The journey was just beginning, and already the impossible seemed closer than ever. Stood frozen for a moment, chains clinking softly as the court waited. The whispers of nobles, which had been hushed at first, now grew louder. They were afraid, but not just of him. They were afraid of what his words implied. A human, small and fragile in appearance, daring to speak truth to the emperor, something that had never happened before in the history of their empire. Every eye weighed him like a scale, measuring whether he was bold or foolish, courageous or doomed. The emperor leaned forward, his long robe spilling over the edge of the throne. The crown on his head glinted in the light, almost blinding, but it did not hide the sharp lines of his face. His lips curled into a sneer. "You dare enter my court, human?" His voice was thunder, shaking the chamber. "Do you even understand the power you challenge?" The soldiers around tightened their grips, and for a second he thought the fear would crush him. His muscles ached from the march, his chest rose and fell with rapid breaths, and the chains bit into his wrists like fire. Yet inside, his fear began to twist into something sharper, something that burned like iron in his veins. It was anger. Not blind anger, but the anger of every human who had suffered quietly under the weight of alien dominance, every life taken, every injustice ignored. Then noticed her again, the alien queen. She was motionless as if carved from stone, yet her presence filled the room more than the emperor ever could. Her gaze met his, steady, silent, almost daring him to speak. It was as if she knew exactly what he would say and that the moment depended on it. Drew a shaky breath, feeling the tension in the air coil around him. "I do understand," he said at last, his voice low but steady. The court flinched. "I understand every death you ignore, every voice you silence, every fear you call obedience. I understand that your throne is not built on justice but on the silence of those who suffer." A sharp gasp cut through the room. Nobles shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Soldiers paused, uncertain if their orders had changed. The emperor's eyes narrowed and his lips pressed into a thin line. He did not expect the words, and he had no immediate answer. The silence that followed was heavy, a pressure that made his chest feel tight. For a long moment no one moved. The only sound was the soft clinking of chains and the distant echo of soldiers' boots on marble floors. Then a voice broke through, a voice both soft and commanding. The alien queen spoke. "You speak truth," she said, and the words rippled through the room like a storm. "And truth is rare in this hall." Every head turned to her. The nobles stiffened. The emperor blinked, unaccustomed to anyone speaking freely against him, and certainly not to hear agreement from a being of such power. Even the soldiers who had held him captive hesitated, unsure whether to obey or flee. His heart thumped wildly, but he felt a strange clarity. He realized that fear, which had been his constant companion, had shifted. Now, courage lived in that fear. He could feel the eyes of the court weighing him, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as someone whose words had the power to disturb even the strongest authority. The alien queen stepped slightly forward, her presence commanding yet calm. Her eyes never left his, silently telling him that he had done what he came to do. Even if the emperor tried to silence him, her support made his words unbreakable. Swallowed hard and lifted his chin higher, letting his voice carry. "I speak not for myself, but for all who have been ignored, for all who suffer in silence. And I will not bow, not to fear, not to chains, and not to the throne that forgets justice." The court froze. Even the emperor's mouth opened slightly, as if unsure how to respond. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat louder. Nobles began to murmur uneasily. The soldiers glanced at each other, uncertain of what to do, and the alien queen's eyes shone with something like pride, a quiet acknowledgement of the human standing before her, unbowed, unbroken, and unafraid. In that moment, the silence of fear transformed. It became a tension, respect, and the first tremor of doubt in a palace that had known only obedience for centuries. Standing in chains, realized something impossible. The court that had come to humiliate him now listened, truly listened, to every word he said. The emperor leaned back on his throne, his eyes narrowing to slits. Could feel the weight of his gaze pressing down like a physical force, heavy and suffocating. Around him, the court held its breath. Every noble, soldier, and servant waited for the emperor's judgment, their faces masks of curiosity, fear, or anticipation. Chains rattled softly as shifted his stance, but he refused to let the discomfort break his focus. "You speak boldly," the emperor said finally, his voice smooth and dangerous. "Boldness is rare, foolishness is common. Tell me, human, why should your words matter in my hall? Why should your life be spared, your people even noticed?" felt the anger rise not just for himself, but for every human who had suffered under alien domination. Memories flashed behind his eyes, villages burned, friends lost, skis filled with alien ships, promises made and broken. Every injustice he had ever witnessed, every cry of helplessness pressed against his chest. He clenched his jaw, refusing to let the fear paralyze him. "I am not here to ask for mercy," said, his voice steady now, ringing with quiet defiance. "I am here to speak truth. My life is not the gift I offer. The gift I bring is justice. And if that is too dangerous for your court, then so be it. My words will still be heard." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The nobles leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Some looked alarmed, others intrigued. Even the soldiers who had dragged him here hesitated. The chains around his wrists, once a symbol of submission, now felt like a declaration. A human could not be broken by mere iron. The alien queen stepped closer to her presence like a shield against the emperor's power. "He speaks truth," she said calmly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "I have watched long enough while false loyalty masked injustice. Let him speak. Let him challenge us all." His heart raced. He had not expected her support to be so openly declared, but it gave him courage he had never known. The court, for the first time, paused not out of fear of the emperor, but out of respect for what was unfolding before them. A human, a single human, standing in chains, daring to confront the most powerful being in their empire, and being supported by the alien queen herself. The emperor's face darkened. He rose slowly, the sound of his robe sweeping across the marble like a warning. "You speak as though your voice has power," he hissed. "Do you think words can sway me or the loyalty of these nobles? Tell me then, human. Convince me. Show me the proof of your worth." Swallowed, his throat dry, but he felt no fear now, only clarity. He looked at every noble, every soldier, and then to the alien queen. "The proof is not in weapons," he said. "It is in courage. It is in standing when everyone else bows. Power is meaningless if it silences truth. Justice is more dangerous than any sword because it cannot be contained." A hush fell over the chamber. Some nobles sank lower, whispering prayers. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what orders to follow. The emperor's jaw clenched, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. But even he could not deny the truth in the words that had echoed through the hall. The alien queen's eyes glimmered with approval. "Courage is not measured by size, strength, or lineage," she said. "It is measured by action, and the human before you acts in the name of all who cannot. That is proof enough." For the first time, the chains felt insignificant. Realized that the test was never the emperor's power. It was whether he could remain unbroken in the face of overwhelming fear. And he had passed, not by bending the rules, not by flattering the court, but by standing tall, refusing to bow, and speaking truth. The emperor's throne suddenly seemed smaller, the hall colder. The whispers of the court grew louder, not mocking but questioning. Doubt crept into minds that had known only obedience, and in that moment understood the truth of his journey. Sometimes one human voice, steady and unafraid, could shake an entire empire. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Words, carried by courage and truth, echoed like thunder through the hall. Nobles shifted uneasily, their finely polished shoes tapping nervously against the marble floor. Some glanced at one another, unsure if they should scorn the human or quietly admire him. Whispers raced like wildfire, fragments of doubt and curiosity weaving through the court. The emperor's face darkened, his pride bruised in a way he had rarely experienced. He rose, robes brushing the floor, a towering figure meant to command obedience. "Enough of your speeches, human," he bellowed. "You dare lecture in my court to my nobles, to me? How dare you?" But did not flinch. His chains rattled softly, a small rhythm in the tense silence. Each heartbeat in his chest felt louder than the emperor's roar. He lifted his head, meeting the emperor's gaze with unbroken resolve. "I do not lecture," he said steadily. "I remind. Remind that power is meaningless if it silences justice. Remind that courage does not bow, even when fear threatens every breath. A ripple passed through the court. Ministers who had whispered turned pale, realizing the truth in his words. Soldiers hesitated, unsure if the orders they had carried out without question still mattered. The emperor's voice faltered, sharp anger mixing with disbelief. "You think your words can change anything," he growled. "You think you can challenge centuries of rule." Before could answer, the alien queen moved. Her presence shifted the atmosphere entirely. She stepped forward, her posture regal, her voice calm yet thunderous in authority. "He does not speak merely for himself," she said. "He speaks for all who are silenced, and in truth, power without justice is hollow. Listen to him, or risk losing everything you believe you control." The nobles froze. Some sank slightly, instinctively kneeling in respect, not to the human, but to the alien queen whose judgment they could not ignore. Even the emperor, proud and unyielding, felt the tremor of doubt creep into his certainty. The chains on his wrists were insignificant now. His courage and words carried a weight far greater than iron or gold. His chest swelled. Fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It became fire, burning through doubt and hesitation. The murmurs of the court shifted from derision to reflection, and then to admiration. He saw it in their eyes, the realization that perhaps, just perhaps, a single human could do what countless others had failed to do, stand unafraid in the face of the impossible. The emperor's glare sharpened, trying to mask the uncertainty growing within him. But the court had begun to stir in a way he could not stop. Nobles whispered to one another, seeking allies, finding courage in the human's defiance. Soldiers exchanged glances, some lowering their weapons subtly, caught between loyalty and an unspoken respect for what they witnessed. And then a subtle yet powerful shift occurred. A junior minister, trembling, whispered, "He speaks the truth." Another nodded, "Perhaps we have followed blind obedience too long." The word spread quietly, steadily, until the hall was alive with the sound of cautious questioning. Felt the power of the moment. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to shout or threaten. His courage, paired with the alien queen's presence, had awakened something far stronger, the human instinct for justice. The alien queen's eyes softened as she looked at him, her silence saying what no words could. "You are not alone. You are the spark that can ignite change." Understood in that instant that this hall, this empire, was listening not because they feared death, but because they respected courage and truth. The emperor's hands tightened on the throne's armrests. For the first time, he realized that power alone could not command loyalty. Respect, obedience born of fear, and truth were far more powerful than his crown or army. And in that realization, the stirring of the court became a storm waiting to break. Remained in chains, but his spirit felt unbound. He had not yet won, but he had done something far greater. He had awakened possibility. And in that golden, oppressive chamber, the impossible began to feel real. The emperor's voice cracked like a whip, but it carried no power anymore. "Seize him," he ordered, fury shaking his words. Soldiers stepped forward, but hesitation held them back. For the first time, loyalty clashed with reason. Their hands shook as they reached for the chains. Some glanced at the nobles, seeking silent permission, and found only uncertainty. Some dared not move, caught between obeying the emperor and honoring the courage of the human who stood before them. His heart pounded. He could see the shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. Fear had ruled this court for generations, but now doubt and awe had crept into their veins. Every whisper, every glance, every small movement became evidence that power alone was not enough. The chains that bound him were meaningless compared to the storm of truth building in the hall. The alien queen's presence became a shield around him. Her eyes, calm yet unyielding, moved across the room, silently declaring that any action against the human would be an act against her. Soldiers hesitated further, caught between the emperor's wrath and her silent authority. Even the nobles, who had long bowed out of self-interest, began to murmur, some kneeling, some whispering prayers, all caught in the human's unspoken power. "You dare defy me in my own palace." the emperor roared, his voice cracking under pressure he could not contain. His face, usually a mask of unshakable pride, betrayed fear, fear that his control could slip through his fingers like sand. Lifted his chin and spoke again, his voice strong despite the exhaustion. I do not defy you for myself. I defy you for all who cannot. I defy injustice. I defy the fear that blinds rulers to the suffering of their people. Your crown does not make you just. Your throne does not make you wise. Only truth and courage do. The words echoed through the hall, each syllable a spark igniting the minds of the court. Some nobles gasped. Others murmured agreements under their breath. Soldiers faltered, some lowering their weapons. The emperor's fury could not erase the truth that had taken root. The alien queen stepped fully into the light, her presence commanding absolute attention. He speaks for justice, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. He speaks for those silenced by fear and power. Any who act against him act against me and against truth itself. The shift became undeniable. Nobles sank to their knees, pledging allegiance not to fear but to courage and justice. Soldiers dropped their weapons, uncertain of the orders they had been given but clear in their respect for what they witnessed. The emperor, the man who had ruled with absolute power, realized that authority without respect is hollow. Felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Chains still bound his wrists, yet his spirit felt freer than it ever had. The court had begun to kneel, not to him, but to the justice he represented. Fear had been replaced with a new kind of reverence, one that even the emperor could not command or crush. The whispers grew louder, spreading through the room like wildfire. Truth, courage, justice. Some repeated the words softly, almost in prayer. Others nodded quietly to one another, their eyes shining with newfound resolve. Every corner of the chamber trembled with a subtle, unstoppable power, the power of an idea that even kings cannot hold back. The emperor sank slowly onto his throne, the first cracks of doubt and fear etched across his face. He realized, too late, that the human he had sought to humiliate had become a force no crown, no army, and no palace could contain. Still standing, still chained, met the alien queen's eyes and felt a silent affirmation. They had begun something that could not be undone. The court had started to kneel, but it was not mere obedience. It was recognition. Recognition that courage, truth, and humanity could move empires in ways no weapon ever could. In that golden, vast chamber, a turning had begun. The impossible had begun to feel real, and the emperor knew that everything he had believed about power was about to change. The golden hall was no longer silent. Whispers had grown into murmurs, murmurs into voices, voices into a tide of realization that rippled through the court. Nobles and soldiers alike were caught in the wave, unsure whether to obey fear or honor courage. And at the center of it all stood, still chained, still human, yet somehow larger than any throne or crown. The alien queen stepped forward, her robes flowing like liquid night, her eyes steady and commanding. The room fell silent instantly. Even the emperor, furious and trembling, could not raise his voice over her presence. "Enough," she said, her tone calm but firm. "The time for doubt has ended. Listen carefully, for truth will not wait any longer." Felt a shiver run through him, not from fear but from the gravity of what was about to unfold. Every eye in the room was on them, every whisper silenced. The alien queen's gaze swept over the nobles, the soldiers, and finally settled on the emperor. Her voice carried across the vast chamber, unyielding and sharp. "The human before you speaks not for himself, but for all who have been silenced. He does not bend to fear. He does not bow to power. He carries the courage of his people and the truth of the world he represents. Any who deny him deny justice itself." The room froze. Nobles sank to their knees, soldiers lowered their weapons, and even the emperor stiffened, realizing that authority alone could not counter this declaration. The alien queen's words had shifted the balance. What had begun as a human trial had become a reckoning for an empire that had long measured loyalty through His chest rose and fell rapidly, but his gaze remained steady. The chains felt meaningless now. The court's attention, the acknowledgement of his courage, had unbound him in a way no physical key ever could. His voice, when it came, was calm but filled with weight. I do not seek glory, I do not seek vengeance, I seek justice. For my people, for all who suffer unseen, I speak the truth. That truth cannot be silenced, no matter how heavy the chains, no matter how powerful the throne. A murmur of awe spread through the chamber. Nobles whispered to one another, soldiers exchanged nods of respect, and even the emperor's pride faltered under the weight of the human's courage. Every word was a spark, igniting awareness that obedience without justice was meaningless. The alien queen raised her hand, a silent command that even the emperor could not ignore. From this moment, she continued, her voice clear and resolute, he is no longer merely a human in chains. He is the voice of justice, the embodiment of courage that we all must heed. Let all who stand in this hall acknowledge him, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as a leader of conscience. The chamber erupted, not in chaos but in reverent recognition. Nobles sank to their knees fully, pledging silent loyalty to the principle of truth he represented. Soldiers lowered their weapons entirely, understanding that honor had chosen a new champion. Even the emperor's mouth twitched, the first cracks of humiliation visible, as he realized that no crown, no throne, and no army could erase the power of integrity and courage. Took a deep breath, letting the moment settle. The chains were still there, but they had lost their meaning. He felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, not with fear or hatred, but with recognition and respect. He had spoken, and in that act he had shifted the heart of an empire. The alien queen's gaze softened as she looked at him. She did not need to speak, her approval was louder than any decree. Understood, he was no longer alone. Courage had companions and justice had champions. The impossible had begun to take shape in the Golden Hall, and the empire itself had started to bow, not to power but to truth. The Golden Hall had transformed. What had once been a place of fear and obedience was now alive with awe, respect, and a quiet, unstoppable power. Stood in the center, still in chains, yet he felt freer than he had ever been. Every eye in the chamber followed him, not as a prisoner but as a symbol, not as a human but as a voice of courage that no throne or army could silence. The emperor's face was pale, a storm of fury, humiliation, and disbelief. His throne, once a symbol of absolute authority, seemed to shrink beneath the weight of the human standing before him. Nobles had knelt fully, pledging allegiance not to his crown, but to the truth represented. Soldiers lowered their weapons, understanding that courage and justice had chosen a champion they could respect. Even the air felt different, thick with the shift in power that words alone had created. The alien queen stepped forward, her presence as commanding as ever. Her voice cut through the tension, calm but impossible to ignore. The human before you has proven what your fear could never control, she declared. He has shown courage, justice, and truth. Let this court remember, no power can stand where integrity thrives. Felt a strange warmth at her words, a quiet acknowledgement of everything he had risked to speak. Chains still bound his wrists, yet they were meaningless now. He lifted his chin, scanning the room. Every noble, every soldier, every official looked at him with something more than respect. They looked at him with understanding. The emperor had lost not because of force, but because courage and truth had moved faster than fear. Stepping closer to the emperor spoke, his voice calm but firm. You have ruled through fear for generations, yet power alone is empty. Respect cannot be commanded, it must be earned. Today the court sees that a single human, unbowed and unafraid, can remind the world of justice. A murmur ran through the room. Soldiers straightened, nobles whispered, and the emperor's jaw tightened. He wanted to strike, to punish, to reclaim control, but he realized it was impossible. The court had shifted. The impossible had become real. A human had stirred what even a king could not contain. The alien queen extended her hand toward, a gesture of solidarity and trust. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then took it. In that simple act, the court understood the unspoken truth. Courage and justice transcended species, lineage, or crowns. Human and alien, standing together, could shape the course of empires. The murmurs of the court turned to whispers of allegiance. Nobles spoke words of commitment, soldiers promised loyalty to justice, and the emperor's eyes, once so full of certainty, reflected defeat. He remained on his throne, but his authority had been hollowed. The chains had not been removed, yet freedom had been claimed through something far stronger than metal: recognition, courage, and unwavering truth. His chest swelled. He had risked everything, yet in doing so, he had ignited a fire. One sentence, one declaration of courage, had begun a revolution in thought, in conscience, and in the hearts of those who had once obeyed blindly. He understood now that heroism was not about strength alone. It was about standing when everyone expected you to kneel. The alien queen's eyes met his, and in them he saw pride, gratitude, and something else: hope. For humanity, for aliens who valued truth, and for a future where courage could change the course of history. Together, they had shifted the balance of power, not through war or bloodshed, but through the undeniable force of integrity and courage. His chains clinked softly as he moved. He no longer felt their weight. The court had knelt, not out of fear, but out of respect. And in that golden chamber, he realized that one human voice, steadfast and unafraid, could make kings bow, queens trust, and empires remember the power of justice. For the first time in his life, smiled, not for victory, not for recognition, but for the knowledge that humanity, even alone, could inspire awe, respect, and change. And in that moment, the impossible had truly been achieved.